So tell us about Code of Honor. I know that it's up for the YA Thriller Award
Yeah, I'm
tonight
really
here
excited
at
about
Thriller
that.
Fest.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. ITW has been doing a lot to support YA thriller fiction lately, and the award is a big part of that. I'm really excited to be nominated for that. I've read a lot of the other nominees, and they're fantastic. Thrillers are such a huge category for adults, but we don't see it as a huge category for kids yet. There are thrillers out there, but it isn't, you don't see shelves of it at Barnes & Noble, for example, not yet. It's buried in with everything else. So I'm excited about that. Code of Honor, the book that's up for the award, is the story of a Persian-American high schooler whose older brother is a U.S. Army Ranger serving in Afghanistan, and his brother goes online claiming credit for a terrorist attack. The guy in the Army does. And the kid here at home can't believe that his brother would do this. He knows that that's not him. He grew up with him. He believes in him, and he starts to obsessively watch the videos his brother's putting out, looking for some kind of clue that he's being coerced into this or brainwashed or something. And he begins to see what he thinks are codes, clues, saying that the guy is innocent. And so he ends up going on the run from the U.S. government, trying to prove his older brother's innocence.
Oh, interesting. So that's very topical.
Yeah, at the time I was writing it, there were the brothers who had conducted the bombing in Boston, and we were watching videos coming out about ISIS. As a matter of fact, when I first started writing it, ISIS was really just hitting the scene, and it was a term and a group that we were just beginning to get to know. And my editor and I had a serious discussion about, should I change the antagonists from Al-Qaeda to ISIS? And I remember telling her at the time, no, let's not, because we don't know if 6 months from now ISIS is going to be gone and we won't know anything about them. And of course, unfortunately, we're still dealing with that. So the book is as timely as it was when I wrote it in terms of the terrorism angle. Unfortunately, things are getting worse before they get better.
Yeah. And now, so this is a YA, but adults, I'm sure, can read it as well. What has some of the feedback been on it from either kids or adults who have read it?
Sure, yeah. So it is young adult. That's 14 and up for those who are not familiar with YA. But 14 and up means that there's the up goes into adulthood. And so what I and a lot of other young adult writers find is that our books are read by a lot of high schoolers, but also by a lot of adults.
I read young adults.
Yeah, I do too, right? And that's why I
Yeah.
write them, because I still read them, and I'm in my 40s. So I think that a large percentage of the readership of young adult books are adults who enjoy reading about that time in their lives, right?
It brings back memories.
Exactly. And it's a young adult that's written for kids is one that takes place right in the moment and is fresh, and there's no time for reflection, whereas there are books, most notably like Catcher in the Rye, that are looking back at childhood and either have a sense of nostalgia or a sense of perspective. And I think those books really are meant to appeal to adults, but proper YA fiction is stuff that's in the moment with no reflection, and it's about kids and what they're going through. And I think a lot of adults still like to read that because they're still in touch with the things that happened to them as high schoolers. I mean, a lot of us remember our first loves and our first disappointments and the embarrassing things and our successes, and I think that reliving those through YA fiction can be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And now you have a book coming out called Project 1065,
Right.
and that's a middle grade.
Yeah.
And I know the general public, I think a lot of people have heard of YA, but people might not be familiar with the term middle grade. So can you tell us about that and the
Sure.
difference?
Yeah, so middle grade is ages 8 to 12. I mean, there you'll find variety in that, but generally it's books for ages 8 to 12. And within the kids book field, we use it to distinguish. You have early readers that are chapter books. You have picture books that are for a kindergarten set. Working your way up, though, sort of 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th graders read what are called middle grade books. And so mine are the kind of books, usually my middle grade ones are the ones you would find in a middle school library. And they are longer chapter books, 200 to 300 pages long, no pictures, but chapters with, and stories that really are meant to engage a more mature kid. Stories that have some depth and complexity. Project 1065 is the story of an Irish kid who is working as a spy in the Hitler Youth in World War II. And so there's some real serious stuff going on in there. Right, yeah.
Well.
So I've done some historical stuff, and it's, of course, easier to get a kid to have agency in historical stuff than it is today. In today's world, the biggest question is, why is an adult not taking care of this situation?
Right.
I mean, it's a question you deal with in every era. But in World War II, we saw kids who were pressed into service or forced to grow up much faster than usual. Whereas in America, we generally don't call upon our kids to be spies in a foreign country. So middle grade, I find I can get a better thriller story out of a historical story like that, like set in another place and time.
What made you want to write a middle grade?
Oh, yeah. So I used to teach eighth grade English.
Oh,
so I was already
okay.
working with middle schoolers. That's kind of the time of my childhood that I really most identify with and still remember. I do write young adult and high school stuff, but I really had, this is unusual, I had a fun time in middle school. A lot of people,
Oh, yeah, that was
right?
the worst time.
I know, right? A lot of people, like my wife is like,
Yeah.
I hated middle school. Everybody hates middle school. But
Yeah.
I loved it. Maybe it was because I was an oblivious geek.
Oh,
I don't
that's
know.
nice.
But I was totally oblivious to all the peer pressure and the hormones and the growing up, and I was just like doing my own thing. And so I really like writing about that time period. Not all my characters are like that, but I really
Right.
like that time because it feels like a time when you're learning who you're going to be as an adult. One of the big differences between middle grade and YA is much more about finding your place in the world, but middle grade is about finding your place in your school environment and your family environment. And I like the smaller scale of those kind of stories. Even if I set them against the larger backdrop of a world crisis like World War II, a lot of it is still about family, about the parents, about the relationships that kid is going through and who they're going to become as an adult. I love those formative years.
And in terms of a writer sort of trying to get an agent interested or a publisher interested, what's important for them to know about trying to pitch a middle grade book?
Sure. So I think one of the most important things is to read a lot of them. A lot of people remember middle grade and young adult from their own childhoods. They may remember The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, or they may have read The Westing Game, which we got referred to in one of the earlier sessions today as a great middle grade mystery. Or they may remember The Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew if they're mystery writers, all of which are a lot of fun and are still being read by kids, but they're not contemporary anymore.
Right.
And the real key is to go to the library or go to the bookstore and pick up books that are being written right now, published right now for middle schoolers and for high schoolers, to look at the New York Times bestseller lists for both of those categories and say what is selling. A lot of times our vision of what those books are is clouded by our own childhood. We remember what books were like in the 60s or 70s or 80s,
Right.
and the kids' book field has changed quite a lot.
Yeah.
It's almost more of an anything goes, but not quite. And so it's important to understand the rules and things and to pick that up by reading it. You need to have a young adult protagonist. Kids generally don't read books about adults. And they generally don't read books about characters who are younger than they are. So you want a protagonist who's about a year or two older than the intended audience. And you want the story to be about the kids in the story. So you don't want to have a kid in a story and then it's all about Michelangelo or it's all about an adult spy that they're hanging around with. It needs to be about the kid and their problems and how they handle a situation. A lot of novice writers who are trying to break into middle grade and young adult don't understand that. They come from an adult perspective, and it's hard to remember to get back to that childhood perspective and tell a story from the perspective of a kid.
Right, right. And how do you market to kids?
Yes,
I know that's like a big question.
No, but it's one I've gone to sessions here at Thriller Fest about and I've struggled with because when you're talking young adult, you can still get on Facebook, and young adults are on Facebook and Tumblr and Twitter, and you can reach them on social media. When you get down to middle school, like where I mostly write, that's much, much tougher. If they are on Facebook, they're not technically supposed to be on
Right,
Facebook, right?
right.
But they are. But if they are, it's mostly just to share stupid pictures with their friends of silly pictures of themselves, right? They're not finding their favorite authors. They're not following them and asking them questions and being street teams for authors. And they are also very sensitive to being sold to. They want you to be genuine. They want to know who you are, but they don't want the hard sell. So how do you get the word out about your book? It's the gatekeepers that I deal with, the librarians, the adults, the parents, the librarians, the booksellers, the people who put books into the hands of young readers. That's who I have to generally appeal to. So I go to a lot of librarian conventions. Each state has its own school library media association meeting, and I've been to dozens of those in different states to meet librarians, to tell them about my books, and to try and grow my audience that way.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So that's been helpful.
That's the biggest thing I've found. I still get letters from kids and write back to all the kids that write to me.
That's
It's great.
nice.
I know, getting fan mail like that is awesome.
Yeah.
And I still have a newsletter and try and interact with kids online as much as I can, as much as they are online. But again, it's really getting to those gatekeepers. And gatekeepers sounds negative. I don't mean it to sound negative, but the people who put books into kids' hands.
Right, right.